guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make 90s drum and bass like Goldie. As usual, you can get the full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it's already available, and yeah, let's get started. So we're at 155 BPM. The first sound we have here are these pads, which sound like this. So as you can hear, a very 90s style of chord. The two layers on their own are this synth pad. You can hear that's creating that movement you hear. And then we have the string pad, which has more of that sort of like 90s-esque sort of sound, but then when you put them together, you get the best of both, because you get this very complex sound that has a lot of movement happening, but it still has that sort of sampled sound to it. Now, for the chords here, what's happening is actually more simple than you might think. So, basically, these are what we would refer to as E minor 11 chords, or minor 11 chords, but there was an E minor somewhere in here that I was playing with. But yeah, so you can see what's happening is we're starting on this F sharp minor here, and then it literally just goes down to E minor. There's what that is. Then it goes down to this D minor. And then it goes down to a C major, actually, but it's like, there's a lot of voices in there. Really, to be honest, the way I write these chords at least, is not necessarily about knowing all these crazy, music theory things and why it's all working. It's really just a matter of like, writing a chord progression like this where it has that more like sort of jazzy feel, just sort of walking down the scale as opposed to like, going up and then down and then back up and all that kind of stuff. If you just kind of walk down like this and then start with like basic minor chords, like, you might start with just those three notes. Those are the three most basic notes of an F sharp minor chord. And then you just kind of add notes that are in the scale on top of that. Like, for example, we have this B here, which is the fourth. We have another F sharp up top. We have a G sharp, which is the ninth. And you can hear that's also kind of got like a major 7 sort of relation to the third here, this A. So yeah, it's not actually as crazy as you think. It's not all this like stuff happening. It's really just start with some minor chords, make a very sort of 90s sounding chord progression like this where it's very jazz influenced and it's just sort of walking down the scale. And then you add notes that are inside of the scale already on top of that. Like, over here, that B, that's just the fifth from this first chord. So, it's like stuff like that. Now, for the sound with this first layer, it's made using analog. This is just 2 saw waves. I've got the first one actually being detuned a little bit, and then I have those going into a low pass filter, and the low pass is being automated. So that's how we're getting that like kind of steadily moving feel. And then like we do little things to make it have a lot of life, like it builds up and then quickly drops down, and then it builds up, quickly drops down, like just doing stuff like that, because that's what's going to make it really feel more like alive. You can also just literally like record this in yourself. Like if you go up here, I'm pretty sure that is the automation arm. It's one of these two. Once you arm it for automation, you can just hit record and start moving this around and do this yourself, literally just with like your mouse and clicking. Now you can see I've also got this LFO on here, which is just moving this slightly. So we're getting 2 layers of motion here, and that's really what's creating the sound. Then I just have this vibrato and a bit of unison, and that's it for inside of the synth. Then we just have some chorus going into a bit of reverb, so these give the sound some space. You can hear it's pretty long reverb. The long reverb works well when you have the filter moving like this, because what's happening is when you get it, like when it jumps down, like how I was showing you, you get still that ringing out from when it was super open, but you're hearing like the main sound is closed. Like that, so it's just creating a lot more of an interesting sound. And then finally we just have some saturation just to beef the sound up a bit. And then on the string pad, it's the same exact chords. And the way I made this one is actually using Ableton's sampler. So this is sort of like the more deluxe version of Simpler, I guess. But you get one thing on here that you don't get on Simpler that was pretty necessary to the sound. So what's happening here is I have this loop on. You can see, yeah, it's just like looping, and then we have the crossfade turned up so it's smoothly fading from the sound. And then what's happening here is I have the voices turned up to 32. So by default it's on 8, and I'm pretty sure that's how many voices you get when you just use Simpler as well. If you don't know, this voices is literally just how many notes you can play at once, which in the case of this, you know, there's times here where we have more than that. So I just turned it up to 32. And now you get the full thing versus like if we put it on 8. We're missing, on that first chord you don't hear it, but on some of these other chords, we're missing some of the voices because there's more than 8 voices playing at once. So you can just turn it up to 32. And yeah, it's a really simple way to make sure that, you know, you're not going to have any problems with that. And that's why I use Sampler, is because you don't get that inside of Simpler. Then I just have this chorus here, as well as a bit of reverb and some saturation. So really similar actually to the first pad with the processing, you know, just giving it some space, beefing it up a little bit. And yeah, that's it for the pad. Then we have the bass line. So this is actually a very simple bass line. What's happening here is it's basically doing these notes at the start of every sort of phrase, and then we're just kind of droning on whatever the root note of the chord is at that time. So like here, for example, you can see like it goes down to F sharp because it's playing an F sharp minor. Up here, it's just playing F sharp. Then in the second one, it does that same and then we go to E because that was the chord that was playing there. And then it does it here. Then we go down to D, and then we end up on A. Yeah, so you can see, like, you know, pretty simple stuff, honestly. It's really about, like, creating that boom, 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 sort of just like the slow-moving bass line. Because if you listen to it, essentially, the breakbeats are happening at regular time, or even double time, I guess you would say. But then the bass line's happening at halftime. So having that boom, 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 with the all the drum and bass stuff happening, that's really what's creating the groove in this track, and what's creating that kind of more like chilled out sort of feel, because yeah, it's just a very chill bass line that just sort of like fits into the track and adds a lot of fat in low end. And I added a few notes here and there, you know, like we have this part where it goes up to that. There's like over here I have another one of these, you know, so it's not like just following the root notes and doing that boom, boom. You can add in a few extra things, and I encourage you to, because that's what makes it interesting. But yeah, pretty simple bass line. It's just more about the groove and how it's fitting into the track rhythmically. Now, for the sound with this one, it's made in a very simple way. What this is a triangle wave, and then I have it going into this low pass filter here. So we're starting with this. And then we put it into the filter and we get that. And so what's happening is it's dialing back some of those higher and more mid-range harmonics. But then also I have this shaper here. So the idea with this is more to kind of create like an 808 type of sound. Like this is what was used a lot in these tracks. It's literally just like an 808 kick from an 808 drum machine. And you can use that, but you can also just kind of synthesize your own in a very simple way. Like I said, we start with the triangle wave, and then putting it through this low pass kind of gives it that deeper feel while still letting some of those harmonics come through. And then when you put it through the shaper, that's giving it that extra like push for fatness. And then I just have that going through some drum bus. So here's without that. So you can hear that does that last little bit to really make it feel like fat and warm as well. I think a big key with this stuff is getting like that really warm bass line. That's the key, because if you just use like a sine wave on its own, it's really not going to sound, it is going to have the low end to it, but it's not going to sound right. It's not going to sound fat and warm. This is how you actually get that warmth out of it to make it really feel authentic. Then after that we have the string, which sounds like this. So this is just that solo string playing over top of the pads. You know, it's just droning on one note, and then we jump to another note. You're having that all the way through. I'm not even getting the note, but just having like that one long held out thing the whole way through really does a lot from the track, and it can like create a lot of tension too. You know, you can maybe have like this part without it, and then you bring it in, and that's kind of like the part where it gets more intense. So you know, it's a very simple element, but it adds a lot to the track. The way I made this one is just playing one note. It's just playing F sharp, so that's the root note of the key that we're in. And then what's happening is I'm using the same string sample from the string pad actually, but I'm using this one inside of a simpler. So you can see I'm doing the same thing. I'm just using this loop, and then we have the length and the fade turned up a little bit, and then yeah, then you can see after that I just have a bit of chorus and a bit of reverb, which is spreading the sound out. And then after that we have this Haas effect here. So here's without this, and then with it. So as you can hear, this is pretty crucial for the sound. What's happening here is this is spreading the sound way out and kind of helping to put it in a different place in the mix from the other elements, you know, because we have these pads with quite a bit of stereo width, but for the most part they're like mainly in the center. And so then we put the string kind of wider using the Haas effect like that, and it helps to separate it. You know, this is how we're hearing literally the same sample play two different instruments in the track, and they're not clashing. It's because of the stereo width and because of how you kind of spread it out. So this is made in a very simple way. All it is I'm just using this audio effect right here, and then I've got one chain pan all the way to the left and one chain pan all the way to the right. And then we have a bit of delay on there. So you can see the delay, what's happening is at 10 milliseconds, we have no feedback, the filter's turned off, and then the dry wet is all the way up. So this is literally just pushing the signal of the right chain all the way 10 seconds to the right. And then what's happening is you're hearing that at a 10 milliseconds delay from the left ear, if that makes any sense. Like it's slightly after when you're hearing the same sound in the left ear, and that's what creates the effect. So yeah, I definitely recommend that when you're making these kinds of strings. Then we just have the saturator. Even though this is a pretty like kind of small sound, you still want it to be as full as possible, and that's what the saturation does. And then finally I just have this auto filter, which is just cutting out the lows, you know, making sure we're not going to have any weird like low end stuff in the mix getting in the way of the bass line. And that's it for the string. And then the last thing down here are these breaks, which sound like this. So what's happening is it's two layers. We have this one and this one. So if you listen to these, this one is kind of adding like the high end and like the sharpness to it. And this one's more for like the low end, and this is where you can hear the kick, you know, really punching through. And then what's happening here is I'm chopping them so that they're literally like all the chops are happening at the exact same time. So it just kind of ends up sounding like one big break. And yeah, with the chops, I just went in and did all these by hand actually. This is pretty much the best way to do it, you know. You kind of just take it and, you know, you get them lined up. So like, maybe you start with like just this little bit, like the boom, like that. And then what you do is you just start taking pieces of that. Like you just start grabbing like, you know, the snares and copying them both at the same time, put them there. You know, it's not actually that hard. Basically, you just go in and you're working with either eighth notes or quarter notes. So I usually keep my grid like this, where it's on the like narrow setting, and then just zoom in. You could also just literally go in and like change this to an eighth note grid or change this to a quarter note grid, and then just start chopping it like that. And that's really how it works. You know, there's not really any other way to do it other than to just kind of get in and start chopping it like this. So yeah, it's not really that hard though, to be honest. Like once you get started, it happens pretty quickly if you're just sort of doing it methodically like that, like going through, making sure everything is happening at the same time, making sure that you're just trying eighth notes and quarter notes. You know, it's really just a matter of like just trying stuff. Like maybe I'll just take that and put it there. And like, okay, that sounds cool. You know, it's more so about just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what's going to sound good, and then, having that work. Rather than like, oh, I'm going to have exactly this second in the track, this chop is going to be happening, That's not a really good way to do it. But if you just go in, get creative, you're going to come up with something pretty cool. And yeah, for effects on these, I don't really have much on them individually. On the first break, or I guess it's break 2 here, but on this high pitched one, I do have a little bit of a high pass filter just so that it doesn't get in the way of this one. But then on the group is where the processing comes in. So I just actually have a bit of drum bus and a bit of EQ. Here's without these. And with them. So the important thing here is, yeah, the drum bus is fattening these up and kind of gluing them together. But really what this is doing that's really good is it's giving it that more like warm sort of analog feel. A big thing with this style of music is the fact that they not only sampled these breaks off of vinyl records, but then they're putting them through like an MPC, then you're putting it through tape, then you're cutting that onto another record, and what ends up happening is you're starting with a pretty clean sounding break. But then by the time it goes through all that stuff, it's going to end up sounding, pretty crunchy and pretty textured. And it can be hard to get this in the box. If we turn these off, again, you can hear, the sound is there, but it doesn't sound as crunchy and as textured as a lot of these records do. And so drum bus is really great for that. Because it's giving it a little bit of compression since I have this transients knob turned up, and that also helps to bring out the kick and stuff. And it also just gives it, a little bit of that crunchier sort of sound, especially when you put 2 of them into there at once. So, yeah, a lot of people are out there looking for the perfect tape vinyl plugin to make this sound like the 90s. And honestly, drum bus is gonna, if you have good sounds and you kind of know what you're doing with it, drum bus is gonna more than do that and give you that crunchy sort of 90s texture without having to actually go and use an old sampler and put it through vinyl and all that kind of stuff that they were doing back in the day. Now, after that, this EQ8 is just cutting out a very small amount of low end. Here's without it. It's really just to focus it so that it doesn't get in the way of the bass line. Because there is a bit of low end in there and you want to keep that in for the most part, but you can hear this way, it's fitting perfectly with the bass line to where they can coexist in the low end without having it be this super messy, crunchy thing that starts happening in the lows. And yeah. That's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything, the drum rigs, all of that are available right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. This is a great way to support me if you guys are enjoying these videos, and it's available on my Patreon and has been since yesterday. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video.